Joining us now to discuss the legal case against the 6 police officers is defense attorney and Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz. Mr. Dershowitz, you've handled cases like this before. What do you think the defense's best course of action is at this point?
Well, first of all, the defense has been put in a terrible position by these indictments. These indictments seem to me to be more a function of crowd control than justice. The state attorney really announced this in a way that was designed to prevent riots. And then the mayor outrageously talked about there will be justice for the victim, for the family, and for the people of Baltimore, without even mentioning justice for the defendants. Remember, the Constitution provides for justice only for criminal defendants. There's nothing in the Constitution about victims or the people of Baltimore or the family. The people who have to get justice now are these police officers who are still presumed innocent but are being treated as if they are absolutely guilty. To his credit, President Obama did talk about due process for the officers, but that's the essential point. The ACLU issued a statement today in which they applauded what happened, but as far as I can tell, didn't mention the presumption of innocence or the obligation to give justice to defendants. That's the core responsibility of the criminal justice system, to make sure that the defendants, the people on trial, get justice according to the Constitution. And that seems to be in last place on the hierarchy of factors that are influencing these decisions today.
So if you're the defense attorney for these officers, what do you do first?
First of all, I seek to have a special prosecutor appointed. This prosecutor clearly has determined that she has to do something to prevent further riots. The idea of indicting these officers based on the evidence that I've seen from murder seems outrageous to me. You can make a case perhaps based on the evidence for involuntary manslaughter, but the idea that anybody wanted this person to die or behaved in the manner that would make this into a murder case seems, again, designed for crowd control more than for justice.
Professor, the mayor and the state's attorney, for that matter, have been exceptionally passionate in the remarks that they have delivered. Can these officers get a fair trial, you believe, in Baltimore?
Absolutely not. I don't think there's any possibility they could get a fair trial. If they were tried today, depending on the nature of the jury, depending on the nature of where exactly it was tried, it seems to me that there is such an atmosphere that you have to convict these people. There are already people on the street saying this isn't enough. Unless there are convictions, we're going to continue to riot. There are other people on the street saying the only reason we got these indictments is because we rioted. If that's true, that's a terrible stain on the Baltimore system of justice. So I think the focus has to shift now to make sure that these police officers who are presumed innocent get justice and aren't held up as scapegoats, to make sure that there's no further rioting.
How is this case any different from any other major trial in America that's gotten a ton of attention and had things happen around the case?
When you have elected officials who clearly want to prevent further rioting and further damage, and that affects the decision not only whether to prosecute, but what to prosecute for, it really is very, very difficult to get a fair trial. In some of the other cases, at least they took their time. They looked at the evidence. They didn't rush to judgment. This seems like a rush to judgment designed to prevent further riots. And that's just anathema to any form of justice.
I wonder, the remarks from the mayor and the state's attorney, what problem, you obviously are not very impressed with how they've handled the situation and what they've said, but what kind of problems does it cause that they've said the things that they have said?
Well, it will cause problems for the defense and the defense attorney trying to get a fair trial. They will probably move for a change of venue to an area that's in a different location. Now, then there'll be a complaint. Oh, they're moving to try to get a more white jury. We want a more black jury. So racial elements will come into play in this case, clearly. And it's going to be very difficult for, a year from now, 16, 18 months from now, to achieve not only real justice, but the appearance of justice. That seems to be missing. The Constitution does not provide justice for victims. That's the political process that does that. The Constitution provides due process only for people who are on trial. And that has to be assured by the people of Baltimore, including their elected officials, even though that's unpopular right now.
So you said you would reach for a special prosecutor. What else would you be doing? What would be the next steps for you if you represented these officers?
change of venue. I would also try to get a gag order to try to prevent prosecutors from trying this case in the press and political figures from trying this case in the press. This case ought to be tried based on the evidence in a court of law in front of 12 objective, neutral jurors who have no stake in the outcome, and by prosecutors who clearly want to see justice done, and without regard to whether it causes a riot. I mean, if an acquittal will cause a riot, and if an acquittal is the right result, that's what should happen. You can't allow the fear of riots to determine the outcome of a criminal case. That's just not permissible.
So do I hear you saying that there is no way you think that they could have come to these charges in a reasonable manner without rushing, or is what you call a rush to judgment?
I don't think there's any way you could come to a murder conclusion based on the evidence that I've heard without there being a rush to judgment. Now, you understand why they felt they had to rush to judgment. There were riots in the street, but you cannot let riots influence a criminal justice system. That's not only the thumb of injustice on the scale of justice, it's the whole hand, and it really prevents any conception of justice if you worry about what the impact of a particular verdict might be on the street. That's just not justice.
To the person who's
control.
Professor, to the person who says, why is it a rush? Why can't a week of doing an independent investigation, looking at everything you've been given, be enough time working around the clock to come up with a sensible decision?
Well, it's possible, but it doesn't seem likely based on the decision they came to. I mean, she basically, the prosecutor, was talking to the crowds. She was saying, you don't have to riot tonight and tomorrow. Don't worry. I've got it under control. I'm over-indicting all these people just to make sure that you have no excuse to riot. A murder indictment under these circumstances seems so inconsistent with the evidence and seems so consistent with a desire to prevent further riots that one has to be very suspicious of the motives. Now, I'm not saying they're evil motives. Preventing riots and crowds is a good motive. It's just not a motive that is consistent with the administration of justice.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.